Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. Here on The Point of View, we pick the right topics, get the right guests, and ask them critical questions about things that matter to you. We're privileged to be talking to the man in the middle of the biggest issue in Ghana in the past couple of weeks. Ghana's lithium find, the contract with a company to exploit it, and what will benefit from this. This conversation has been raised many notches by the involvement of people like the IEA, the involvement of Imani, and most recently the involvement of other civil societies in discussing the pros and cons of what we've signed with Atlantic Lithium's subsidiary here in Ghana. So tonight on the show, we're speaking to the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources to try and address some of the key issues that have been raised about what we get from mining generally, what the terms of this particular mining lease are, and the way forward for mining developing our economy in a better way. All of that when we come back. Stay with us. So tonight we're sitting with Sector Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, Samuel Abu Jinapor, who is also the MP for Damongo, to address key questions around Ghana's mining lease with a subsidiary of Atlantic Lithium in Ghana, Berari DV. Good evening, welcome to the program.
Good evening, Bernard, and it's very good to be here. And let me say a big hello to your listeners and your viewers.
As if by design, it's been a very busy past 2 weeks because COP28 is related to lithium.
Yes.
In the sense that once we transition, emissions must reduce. Electronic vehicles are powered by lithium-ion batteries predominantly. So in a sense, all of this is happening at the best time. Would you agree?
Well, I agree with you. I mean, at COP28, as you know, the COP that happened in Dubai, which is the COP which was described as the stock-taking COP, which is the COP that we're using to determine progress. One of the biggest issues which dominated the negotiations in Dubai was the EV, what they call EV, energy transition, and the call for the eradication of fossil fuel, and therefore electric vehicles, ion batteries, lithium, manganese, phosphate, graphite. All of those are very important elements and components to this whole ambition of the world to ensure that in the not too distant future, fossil fuel will be eradicated. Yeah. So it was a big issue.
So the discussion in Ghana where people say, for example, that we've mined for many years and it hasn't really transformed the economy, although we've gotten money from it. And they feel that when it comes to these green minerals, these newer types like nickel and lithium, we need to approach it differently from both environmental perspective and also from national development perspective. You agree?
Well, first of all, let me say that I agree with that suggestion, and I do so forcefully. And it's the reason why we have done all that we've done. In fact, as far back as 2018, President Akufo-Addo was a keynote speaker at the Mining Indaba in Cape Town, where President Akufo-Addo spoke eloquently about just the matter that you've raised, which is the need for Africa to develop novel, innovative framework or architecture for the management and development and exploitation of the green minerals of Africa, particularly lithium. And therefore, you will see that government had to take various steps, various processes in order to develop a policy for the management, exploitation, and utilization of the green minerals of our country, and which is why on 13 July 2022, I presented a policy paper to Parliament setting out the proposed contours for the development and utilization of the green minerals of our country. And which is why on 27 July 2023, on the insistence of the President, the President insisted that before we get into any form of negotiations with any company, in respect of the exploitation of lithium resources in our country, we needed to develop a policy which is approved by the cabinet.
Yeah.
We therefore had to go before the cabinet, and at the 55th cabinet of President Akufo-Addo on 27 July 2023, it took us almost about 4 or 5 hours of interrogation for us to develop the policy, and the policy was developed, and I have the terms of the policy which was approved by the cabinet right before me here, and which is the basis on which we move forward to negotiate with Atlantic Lithium, and which is the basis and the reason for which we signed this lease, which has become the subject matter of discussion in this country. And so I make the point, I make all these points to say that this call is one that the government has been mindful of from day one, and which is why the government has been that thorough and detailed and systematic in arriving at this point, and that is why
in that policy,
yeah.
There were 3 options for addressing green minerals. The first one was to incorporate into the 2014 mining policy some specific provisions for management and exploitation of the green minerals. Then there was the option of preparing some general guidelines to support engagement and negotiation, and then the option of preparing a completely separate policy and legal regime. Cabinet approved the first option. Can you talk to me about why they did that? Because there's a strong view among civil society that because green minerals are part of the new economy and they are so important, while the policy is great, deriving from the policy should be a new legal framework. So like petroleum came in 2007, and we had the Petroleum Commission Law in 2011, the Petroleum Revenue Management in 2011, and then the Petroleum Exploration Law in 2016. We should have gone ahead to create a new legal regime deriving from this before moving on to this agreement.
Okay. So first of all, I mean, those contributions and critiques and proposals are all very welcomed, and I have said it many times that it's only as a result of us having a national discourse and such intense national discourse as we are having that we can get the best for our country. There's absolutely no two ways about that. So the contribution of civil society and other stakeholders is wholeheartedly welcomed. But having said that, the cabinet really examined the implications of all the options and came to the conclusion that they did. The first, I mean, I cannot give the chronology of which one is first, but I just use the first as in the 3.
Yeah.
One of the 3 was that go on the lines of GIADEC or the Ghana Integrated Iron and Steel Development Corporation, or create a new corporation which will be termed the Green Mineral Development Corporation, which will be exclusively responsible for the management and utilization of the green minerals of our country. Now, the difficulty with that, and the fundamental reason why that was not accepted, was because whenever you have to create that kind of institution, you must be satisfied that you have in-country sufficient resource deposits which will support the establishment of that kind of corporation. You have to have sufficient, and that has been the international practice. And that has been the practice or the basis on which GIADEC and GISDEC were established. When it came to bauxite, we had sufficient resource deposits. When it came to iron ore, we had sufficient resource deposits. In Ghana, the Ewoya concession is just, if you want, a drop in an ocean. And it's the first concession, the first transaction we are getting into. And so the idea of establishing a corporation was not attractive because you didn't have sufficient resource deposits. Now, the second one, which was to have legislative amendments and so on and so forth.
Or new laws.
New laws.
Why didn't that come up?
That also was seen to be cumbersome, and it's going to take a lot of time, it's going to take a lot of resources. And more importantly, the option which was chosen addresses or achieves the same objectives or the same objective that establishing or enacting new laws would have done. I'll give you an example. The option which was chosen, which is amend the minerals and mining policy, has meant that arising out of that policy, we are required to amend aspects or portions of the Minerals and Mining Act 206, Act 703, which will serve the same purpose as if you had gone the long route, the more expensive route of enacting new laws. And as you know, Bernard, one of our biggest issues as a country historically has been about enacting new laws over and over again, when there are existing laws that if when you tweak them, they will serve the same purpose. So that is why that option was decided upon.
Well, there are a couple of pushbacks there. Green minerals, as we've already said, are different in the sense that for example, exploring for lithium may not be as expensive as exploring for gold. So if you look at prior to 2023, governments have not invested in the exploration, which is why we need foreign companies to do this for us. Now, if you look at the amount that this company spent in exploration, if you compare it to what gold or diamond exploration cost, is much higher. So basically, they are saying that green minerals don't cost as much to explore. So that's one difference, all right? Number two, the way you mine them is very different. So Central Region, for example, has not had this type of mining before. It requires a lot of electricity. It may affect water as well. And because of, again, what you said about COP28 and the whole economy around electronic vehicles, I'm not saying form a GRDEC. The argument is that write new laws to capture the importance of this. In addition to the fact that, again, gold, we've not added value in a long time. But if you look at these new green minerals, the sentiment is that we have to locally process and add value here, expand the value chain. And people want us to lock that in the law. The previous laws for gold have focused a lot on royalties, on corporate tax, on ground rent, and on the carried interest. Those are all fiscally focused laws. But and this is not just from Ghana. The African Mining Vision says this, 2009 AU. So the view is that you need a new law to capture the new aspirations around mining. And green minerals represent the best opportunity to do that. So maybe Cabinet missed a trick.
Well, that is a very eloquent rendition of what you believe should have been the way to go. And I don't dismiss it, which is that pass a gamut of laws to manage and exploit these minerals, and also that set up something like GRDEC, which will be a corporation to deal with these minerals. The points I make are in two parts, two fundamental points. The first one is that if you look at the petrochemical industry, for example, and do a little inquiry about it, you will find out that it took subsequent discoveries and subsequent establishment of the resource base for us to set up a petroleum commission and set up this and set up that and pass legislations to deal with that. Now you have a situation where the arrangement we have will deal substantially, if not conclusively, with the issues we seek to work on, the objectives we seek to achieve. So that is one. But point number two, which is even more fundamental, Bernard, out of all this discussion, I respectfully have identified 2 or 3 fundamental issues which are of concern to a segment of our society. And I should quickly add legitimate concern. We must be legitimately concerned about that. And you alluded to it. What is the concern? The concern has been that, look, over the years, the mineral resources of our country, i.e. gold, bauxite, diamond, manganese, and the rest, they've been managed and exploited in a manner that they've not benefited us as a country. And some term it colonial architecture type of mining. Is that not so? And they go as far as rightly comparing Obuasi, Takwa, Huni Valley, Prestia to Johannesburg, to Perth, to America, to Canada, and so on and so forth, and says that those places, their mining resources have been exploited and managed in a manner which has served their interests and unleashed prosperity to the mass of their people. Now, the question is, or the point is, these countries and their mining industries, and I have had occasions both internationally and locally to speak to this extensively, they've unleashed the kind of prosperity they enjoy today because of the concept of indigenous participation. I'm not an expert in mining. I've been a minister for 3 years. That doesn't make me an expert in mining. But Bernard, I have been around and read enough and spoken to enough people and taking decisions here enough to know that that is the crux of the matter. If your people don't have stake, they don't have equity in the mining operations, you will not benefit. You are right. The royalties, even the taxes, let's face it, royalties, taxes, free carried interest and what have you, they give you some dividends to a limited extent, and which is which is what has been the case over the years. So how is this transaction or this lease different from the so-called colonial architecture for mining? In this lease, we have negotiated carefully and successfully agreed that Barari DV Limited will mandatorily, will compulsorily list on the Ghana Stock Exchange. And indigenous participation will be a minimum of 30%. In fact, as we speak, state participation is 19%. And we say that the chief executive officer of the Ghana Standards Board of the Ghana Stock Exchange, should come up with a gamut of measures which will prevent fronting. So you have a situation for the first time in the history of Ghana's mining industry. We are having to insist that a company list on the Ghana Stock Exchange float shares and have Ghanaians hold up to a minimum of 30%. All the large-scale mining companies we've had in this country from 1957 to date, none of them have had to be obliged to list on the Ghana Stock Exchange. So this is the first fundamental pillar which jettisons this colonial architecture of mining.
But the challenge with that is that, for example, when MTN floated, the Ghanaian financial stack is not very deep. So you don't have a lot of private Ghanaians with money to take up these offers. So the vehicle of MIF may be the best, which you are using to acquire 13%. The concern has been that while that is a good thing, MIF may be buying an overpriced stock in the sense that the price at which they paid for the 36 million that they are putting in is too high. And that,
but they disagree.
Yes, but there's information around how other directors from the parent company bought, for example, the shares at 0.15 USD, whilst we are paying much upwards of 0.4. So there's a concern that whilst the idea of ownership using the vehicle of MIF is great, MIF itself may be buying a stock at too high a price to give us enough of a control, particularly because, as I said to you, private sector ownership through all the listings have shown that the Ghanaian financial sector's depth is very, very weak. So it may end up foreigners still buying those shares because there's no money.
Well, it's going to be difficult for foreigners to buy it because we've cast it in iron and it's in agreement and it's going to be legislated upon. And so those shares must necessarily be indigenous owned shares. And we are looking at...
if there's no money?
No, we're looking at pension funds. We're looking at SNET. We're looking at institutions which has funding and who are able to hold these shares, who are able to buy the shares.
Which is why the valuation issues raised are critical. Because if MIF buys the shares at a price which is considered overpriced already in a very volatile...
No, but Bernard, it's also important to be fair to MIF, because I've listened to the CEO of MIF who has defended the pricing and the processes leading to the purchase of these shares. So yes, this is the one school of thought, but MIF has a different school of thought. But what is the point I'm making? The point I'm making is that we have insisted on a minimum Ghanaian indigenous participation of 30%. We are looking at pension funds, SNET, we're looking at other institutions, we're looking at high-earning private sector Ghanaian individuals. I'm not going to agree to the proposition or the idea that there are no Ghanaian private sector people here who will not be willing and capable of putting good money on the table to take equity and shares in Atlantic Lithium.
Just a quick point.
I don't see it.
Quick point around the choice of a lease as against, and this has come up again, but we need to address it, the feeling that a joint venture or a service contract may have been the best route to use. Because again, the very nature of a lease agreement or a concession is essentially, I'm giving it to you to do what you want to do with it, and my focus is on royalties, and taxes, as against I am in it with you on equal terms, and therefore I can also strategically decide how to deploy the resource.
No, that's not correct.
Which one is not correct?
It's not correct that we have just given it to them to exploit as they please, and that we don't take any stake in it. I've just been explaining to you that we have, for the first time in our country's history, insisting on 30% Ghanaian participation. So this is not going to be an entirely Australian operation. That's not going to be the case. And that is the first time we've been able to negotiate that kind of arrangement. So the issue of you've just handed over.
No, the view is that a minority share doesn't give the company, the Ghanaian interest, the real strategic positioning to determine strategy. Because we've had Ghanaian shareholding in some of the mining companies in the 80s, and still there are years. For example, there's a mining company that's run in this country for 10 years. They declared dividend for only 3 out of the 10. There were Ghanaian shareholders, there were Ghanaian government board members. So the point is that if you go with a JV or if you go with a service contract, it means that the ownership and the strategic decision, because if you decide you are going to process lithium here to do lead-ion batteries or lithium-ion batteries, if you have control, you can do that. But if the partner company who has 70% shares says, Piedmont has already given me money, and therefore I'm going to sell 50% of my products to Piedmont at this determined price, the minority shareholder doesn't have much of a say. But that's the real issue.
Well, but they can't do that now. In this particular arrangement, it's not possible. It's not possible because, number one, the arrangement we have in itself, ab initio, is a joint venture arrangement. It's a joint venture between the Ghanaian government and Atlantic Lithium. That's a joint venture arrangement. We hold already 19% in Harare.
But it's not on equal terms.
What? Hold on, I'm saying.
I understand what a joint venture is.
Hold on.
They are saying
I understand.
that the issue is control and strategic decision.
Well, I'll get to that. I'll get strategic. But I'm saying that let us agree that the structure we have is essentially a joint venture structure. What the structure is, the strength of the parties is another matter altogether. Whether we are minority and they are majority is another matter altogether. But the call that you should have gone a joint venture way, that is the way we've gone.
That's why.
That is the way we've always gone in Ghana.
But in the contract, they have agreed to sell 50% of the lithium to Piedmont. That's a fact. This is a company that is a related company. All right. So that's what I'm saying, that if your objective as a country is to develop the value chain of lithium, the objective of the company is to sell lithium oxide to its parent company. Those are not necessarily the same strategic objectives.
Well, those are some of the problems we've had to be dealing with, and I do so reluctantly and with the greatest of respect, which is that all of these matters have been thought through and have been dealt with. The off-taker agreement between Atlantic Lithium and Piedmont requires ministerial approval by law. And the company is yet to present this agreement to the Minerals Commission. And the Minerals Commission will have to examine it, and the Minerals Commission will have to make recommendations to the minister for the minister to take a decision on it. So that doesn't even come up in the first place. I've heard that. I mean, people have said that, and people have gone on high heavens to say, how can you allow that? How can you allow Atlantic Lithium to have an off-taker arrangement with a foreign company that says that they are going to sell 50% of their minerals to that particular company, and that is going to end up compromising the interests of Ghana and so on and so forth. When that process is yet to begin, they are yet to present this off-taker agreement to the Minerals Commission for Minerals Commission to examine that.
Kofi Ansa and Fuchikata in the analysis say that because the lithium market is dynamic and volatile, government should do two things. Be clear about the price that Atlantic will sell the lithium to Piedmont, that it's at arm's length and not internal pricing against our laws. Number two, that the government should possibly have a side agreement with the company which will provide for the engagement of an independent, reputable company to provide on regular basis current prices, which will be the basis for all the calculations. So they are concerned that because of the volatility of the price and because of the intimate relationship between the company and its financer in their sales, government needs to lock in this suggestion that will protect us when it comes to price.
Okay. So Mr. Kofi Ansa and Mr. Fui Hekata are two of the, if you want, the most respected mining experts in our country.
Yeah.
Mr. Ansah himself was the first CEO of Mencom, and I respect their views very well. I mean, Mr. Fui, for example, I've quoted him several times. Now, I like this kind of discussion. I like these interventions, which is to say, look, the transaction is fairly good. I mean, it's the best we could have gotten. But in order to get full benefit in its implementation, look at this, take a look at that, do this, keep an eye on this. That, for me, is progressive.
So would you take what they've said?
No, I'm not saying I'll take that, but I'm just making the point that the discourse at that level is productive.
You prefer the approach? Fair enough.
I prefer the approach.
Fair enough.
And I prefer the approach because I know as minister that the sources, beneficiation or otherwise, and the interest the Ghanaian people are going to get or otherwise will fundamentally depend on how the Ghanaian government police the processes leading to first ratification, second the construction of the mine, third the production, fourth the value addition, the beneficiation, and thirdly the benefit sharing. That for me is where, that's the gravamen of the whole matter. That's the crux of the matter. I personally, as minister, I am very satisfied with the terms if I agreed with them. This was thoroughly negotiated. This was done in a space of about 2 years, and this has really been knocked down properly. But Mr. Ansah and co are correct when they say that there are areas, there are potential loopholes, and we all know that in the extractive industry, if you don't open your eyes wide, a lot of things will go.
So we'll take a break and come and deal with some of the suggestions they've made and consider whether they are worth incorporating into the deal as is. This is the point of view. We're talking to Sector Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, and we are discussing the Ewoyaa lithium mining lease between government and Berari. Stay with us. Welcome back to the point of view. Tonight we're looking at the Ewoyaa lithium mining lease. Very controversial. Minister of Lands came from COP 28 a few days ago, been in Parliament, met with some people discussing aspects of this deal, which we see is related because lithium is part of these new metals that will define the new economy. And he says it's fair game. Now, let's deal, Honorable Minister, with some of the other issues with this contract. So, for example, they're talking about us locking in the issue of processing. You've said that we'll not export raw lithium, but it's a very technical area. They've said, for example, that there's lithium oxide, but in terms of the raw materials, there's the so-called spodumene, and there's also lithium carbonate, which actually gets to be used in the battery. So that the concern is that there isn't clarity as to the insistence of government on making sure there's some refining or processing here. So based on the agreement and what you know, what actually is the company exporting? And in what form is it? Are they exporting the raw material? Are they adding any value to it here? Are they doing any processing at all? I think that question needs to be addressed.
Okay. So first of all, I mean, this was a subject that was subject matter of intense negotiation. The issue that arose was, are we going to allow this company to export our lithium resources in this raw form? Or are we going to add value to it? But even before I proceed, I think it's important also for us to accept some realities. And what do I mean by accepting some realities? Bernard, across the world, it is only China that has an end-to-end value chain. Not even the United States. I don't know if you're aware of that. Not in the United States. Australia has spent billions of US dollars to try and have an end-to-end. They don't have it. Now, so we are having to take a decision that, strategically speaking, at what level of the value chain do we play? Where do we tap into? And our minimum position is that come what may, we must refine the lithium that is produced. So the lithium will not be exported in its raw form, which is why when you look at Schedule 2, Clause 1 of the lease, you will see that we've set out copiously mandatory provisions which requires Atlantic Lithium to conduct feasibility studies, to conduct scoping studies, and come up with a feasibility report on the project economics for the establishment of a refinery here in Ghana to add value to the lithium resources. We have also said that should Atlantic Lithium fail or neglect to establish a refinery here in Ghana, when a third party establishes a refinery, Atlantic Lithium will be duty bound, will be contractually bound, legally bound to sign an off-taker agreement with that refinery.
That is true. The concern is that the first point you made about Atlantic conducting feasibility studies, people are, and again, if you read the contract, it's not very clear what specific parameters that feasibility studies to satisfy for them to say we cannot establish a refinery or not. So that, and again, Kofi Ansah, and if we agree that you must be more precise for all of us to know that these are the specific outcomes that will determine whether you should do the refinery or not.
That's a fair point for them to make, but having acknowledged that's a fair point for them to make, it's also important for me to point out that this feasibility is not going to be at the whims and caprices of Atlantic Lithium. They are going to do it under the direct supervision of the Minerals Commission. And the Minerals Commission are going to have experts who are going to work with Atlantic Lithium hand in gloves. And so therefore, if Atlantic Lithium were to come and say because of electricity pricing of so much, because of gas of so much, because of this of so much, the establishment of a refinery was not feasible, the Minerals Commission will be in a position with their experts to counteract that. And if they counteract that, that conclusion will not hold.
But I feel like if, for example, I read an Imani brief, they said, for example, for tracking purposes, we could say that the establishment of a lithium refinery can be based on profitability level, raw lithium availability, electricity pricing availability, tax waivers. But I'm saying that it's not.
Is that not what the feasibility
but
will do?
the information available to us does not tell us the conditions that must be met for a refinery to be possible. So it's arbitrary and the company can wriggle out of it. That's the feeling.
No, I don't think so. And I think that that's where the focus should be. That's why I've taken a decision to establish a project monitoring and delivery team, which I intend to outdoor very soon, which project monitoring and delivery team will be responsible for monitoring and ensuring that this project, the Atlantic Lithium project, is monitored and delivered in a manner that serves the interests of Ghanaians. Some of the civil society and some of the experts who have made contributions, who have made proposals and the rest, we may call upon them if they are available.
The other point,
if they are available and willing to serve on this team, we will call up them into it. For us to make sure that ultimately, the various components of this lease, as it relates to Ghanaian public interests, are protected.
The other point is that we use the word refining in the agreement throughout. Refining is a very broad term when it comes to lithium, because value is not added uniformly at every stage. So for example, we have spodumene concentrate, which is the main product from the Oya mine. You can turn it into lithium monohydrate. That can be refining, but the value addition is very small. You can also process it into lithium carbonate, which is a second or third level value addition. And that's all under refining. So does the agreement broadly explain what kind of refining we are talking about?
Well, I suspect very much so that when you structure these kinds of leases, you don't go into that level of detail. I believe where this will come up is when the feasibility study report is presented to the Minerals Commission. And as I indicated to you, the Minerals Commission is participating in the conduct of the feasibility studies. And therefore, at every stage where the Minerals Commission has concerns, they will raise it. And when the feasibility study report is put on the table, this project implementation team that I've just mentioned to you about will definitely insist that the value addition should be at the highest end. The refining should be, as you have eloquently articulated, should be at the highest end of refining. And so these are details that we will get to.
Okay.
And for me, I am more excited when we get into those areas, into the areas of how do we, as a country, police the terms of this agreement. How do we, as a country, put in place measures to ensure that this project benefits the Ghanaian people.
But some of the suggestions go to the terms. So I agree. Some of the suggestions that are being made are saying that the terms must change for the agreement to be accepted. And for example, there's a suggestion that the royalty rate be a minimum with a sliding scale formula which captures the increasing profitability along the prescribed scale, because again, the price of the product is quite volatile. So, and again, as I said, this was initially proposed by Bright Simmons. Again, Kofi and Sam Fuichikata agree that they believe that we have to amend, because you've said, oh, the royalty is the highest we've had. Again, that
is correct.
But that's compared to gold. This is the first time we're having lithium or any of the new
Well,
minerals.
not compared to gold. Compared to lithium production in other countries.
No, but
Zimbabwe has more lithium than we do. They are doing a royalty rate of 5%. How do you explain that?
We have to,
Mali has 5%.
So we have to look at our circumstance and do what's best for us.
But you can't compare lithium to gold. You have to concede on that.
You just said to me that Kofi and Sam Fui are two of the best minds. Now let me read what they said. Let me just read what they said.
Yes, go ahead.
The first two relate to suggestions by Bright Simmons, which we share, about the formula for increasing royalty and state equity for projects. We are in broad agreement with the suggestion that the royalty rate of 10% be a minimum with a sliding scale formula which captures increased profitability along the prescribed scale, but would propose that for ease of administration, the variation should be simply based on price rather than operating margin. So what they are saying is that as the price changes, the royalty can change to reflect it. Because if you lock yourself, for example, they've started mining gold in Ghana. When I was young, gold price was around 500 per ounce. It's now over 2,000. Now, if your royalty reflects the price, then you can benefit more when the price changes. Now, this is what they are proposing. But it's not in the agreement.
And when the price goes down, what happens?
Well, you are the owner of the resource. You do that to lock yourself.
No, I hear you.
Yeah, so we are negotiating for Ghana. Let the company deal with that.
Listen to me. I'm not debating them or arguing with them, because I shouldn't. I mean, I'm not a brute expert in this area, but I'm just from on top of my head. My understanding of this is that a royalty rate of so much, which is pegged to the pricing of lithium. So when the price of lithium...
It reverts to the 10. That's why they mean by the scale.
When the price of lithium goes up,
yes,
royalty should go up.
Yes.
When the price of lithium dips to the bottom, what happens?
That's why we calculate the average prices, because the way the whole conversation is about anticipation and
we'll take a look at that.
Fair enough. Take a look at that. Then, but the question though is that all these suggestions that you are saying, you take a look at it. How can you change it? Because let me read now NDC. NDC are your colleagues on the other side. Now they've said a number of things. They agree with most of the things I've said to you already. But their main point in their conclusion is that in the face of these pertinent issues, some of which refer to laws that must be passed and all the things I've said to you, they are saying there's a non-existence of feasibility report and a mandatory requirement for local processing of lithium. They are of the view that the Ghana-Berari lithium deal is not in the best interest of Ghana. Now here's the key point. The ratification of the mining lease should not even arise at this stage. It is their considered position that Parliament should not consider the ratification until these pertinent issues, some of which you say you will look at, are satisfactorily addressed. So the point is that you've already signed an agreement with Berari. If you send that agreement to Parliament, NDC say they won't even consider ratifying it, because we know what ratification means. So are you saying to me that you agree with some of the suggestions and therefore you will do a new agreement with Berari before you send that? Or are you going to send it in this form?
I haven't said that at all. I think it's important that I make that very clear. I have not said that at all. I have listened to the suggestions that have been made, and I've said that we need to have an open mind in listening to the suggestions. I have said that the terms of this lease are very competitive, one of the best in the world. I mean, for example, as I was trying to indicate to you, if you take the whole world, Australia accounts for 52% of lithium production across the world. That's a fact. And yet in Australia, and indeed, Australia's grade is one of the highest, obviously higher than our grade. And yet the royalty rate in Australia is 5%. Our royalty rate is twice. It's 10%. If you take, for example, Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is the highest producing country when it comes to lithium. The royalty rate in Zimbabwe is 5%. In Ghana here is 10%. If you take, for example, Mali. Mali has large deposits of lithium resources, and yet the royalty rate in Mali is 6%. Ghana is 10%. And if you take, for example, the issue of free carried interest, when you go to Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe is, as I said, Zimbabwe is the leading producer of lithium in Africa, and yet they have 0%. Hold on. I'm going to arrive at a point.
You recognize that Ghana has a stronger mining legacy than Zimbabwe. So even though Zimbabwe has a lithium
well, let me give you all the comparisons first.
I get you. You keep using Zimbabwe. Ghana has been mining since 1897. So if there's anything at all, Zimbabwe should be learning from Ghana on how to structure their mining deals. The truth is that they started mining lithium before us. But as a sector, Ghana has much more track record in government, in opposition, in civil society than Zimbabwe.
But you were very quick to point out to me, you were very quick to make a comparison between gold and lithium.
Yes.
So let's deal with lithium. Lithium, Zimbabwe has the largest deposits of lithium. They are the highest producing a country in Africa. They started producing before Ghana, and yet they have a 0% free carried interest. We've negotiated 13%. Hold on. Mali, 10%. Ghana, 13%. So what's the point I'm trying to make? And then, of course, you can go on and on. If you go to corporate income tax, you have it here. Corporate income, Australia is 30%. Mali is 30%. Zimbabwe is 25%. Ghana alone is 35%. The highest across the world.
We recognize that.
So, but the point I'm making is that, look, the suggestions which have been made, the disputations and also the debate, which is, in my view, welcome and healthy, all of those, the point I'm making, all of those are very much in accord with the tenets of a vibrant, democratic country. And we welcome that. Yeah. Nonetheless, government is, and it's not because we are stubborn or adamant or not a listening government, but it's because this transaction, we believe, is the best you can get for the Ghanaian people.
Even and so, we stand by that's what's baffling me, Minister, because if some of the suggestions, and I'm not using just the royalty, if some of the suggestions, for example, government should have the option to increase its equity interest in the company on some agreed favorable terms after the investors have recouped their investment. A direct suggestion that has been made in relation to how the MIF can expand its interest.
But where is that done in the world? Give me an example.
In fact, what the point I make is that
where is that done?
You can't say on investment. You can't say you welcome.
What has happened to return on investment?
Let me read the
what has happened to risk, entrepreneurship,
but what has happened to ownership, community involvement?
1%.
But that's what has happened to
1%.
if the lithium remains underground, Ghana will not collapse. This company that's coming to mine the lithium in the pantheon of lithium mining companies is a very big company. So it's not like Ghana is.
If the lithium that is a very.
What will happen to Ghana?
Listen to me. I know about this with respect, Bernard. I know about the nationalism and stoking of national emotions. I very much understand those things. Yeah. And when it comes to natural resources, it's one of the areas you can easily whip up national emotions and sentiments.
That's interest.
Fine. Not so much interest all the time. You can whip up national sentiments. We've seen it before in Ghana. We saw it in the 70s. We saw it in the 80s. Expropriation, nationalization, and the rest. It all didn't take us anywhere. In fact, it took us to the doldrums.
But the environmental concerns too.
Well,
so you can say that. No, I'm just trying to say that the fact that somebody says they want to mine and they've done prospecting is not a gun to our head. We can say we don't want to do it.
Well, in any event, that also is another matter. The people got their recognizance license in 2012.
Fair enough.
And by law, when you explore, when you go into exploration and you make discovery, you have a right, you're entitled to a mining lease.
But the government is also, the government has the right to say, we are not satisfied with the plan you've given, your development plan, and if you don't approve the development plan, nobody can force them to begin mining, which is why in their
that's not correct.
In their letter to their shareholders, they were very clear that they have met the conditions set by government. Yeah. So my point is that
very respectfully, Bernard, that is not entirely correct.
Which one?
At the statement you've just made, you see, lithium is a mineral.
Yeah.
And so lithium ab initio is captured by the Minerals and Mining Act 206, Act 703.
Yeah.
And Section 6, Section 6 actually. Section 6 of Act 703 sets out the parameters for the grant or refusal of a mining lease. Okay. Now, we don't have any special legislation to deal with lithium. And even if we did, it could not take a retrospective effect. You know that. Now, so ordinarily, this discovery would have just resulted into them applying for a mining lease as they did, and the government of Ghana having to approve it, unless on stated grounds, whose stated grounds can be challenged. And as a matter of fact, Atlantic Lithium could have insisted on the terms which have been set out in Act 703, that free carried interest is 10%.
Our parliament
This
would
is
have said they won't ratify it.
Well,
The law we've created in Ghana is very clear. So all the things you said are true, but they can't begin mining if parliament says no. You have said this.
Yes, of
so
course.
the point I'm making
Of
is
course,
a double
but I'm
point.
saying to
So
you that
the parliament represents the people. The people of Ghana can
but I'm saying to
we
you
don't
that-
want them to do the mining.
But I'm saying to you, see, that is
Through
that-
parliament.
No,
Through parliament.
hold on. What I'm saying to you is that
Yeah.
you say that leave the lithium underground.
As an option.
Nothing will happen to Ghana.
Yeah.
I'm saying that the proposal or the option of leaving the lithium to the ground, that has been overtaken by events, because the company got its prospecting recognized license in 2012. They've metamorphosized to prospecting. They've done they've made a commercial find, and by law, Section 6 of Act 703, they're entitled to a mining lease.
That's true, but I'm saying that you can say that, for example, you are not satisfied with the environmental impact assessment result, and therefore you are not going to allow them to proceed until you satisfy yourself with that. Parliament can say that the terms of the agreement are not favorable to Ghana and therefore do not ratify. So whilst I agree with you, I'm also saying that there's no automaticity to their beginning to work. That's very clear.
Article 298 or 292, the exercise of a discretion. You can't exercise it capriciously. If their conditions satisfy environmental protocols, environmental standards, and they meet all the conditions.
That's a big if.
You can, if.
And
yes,
that
I'm
if
saying
is
if.
contingent on.
But that is theoretical. I mean, all these arguments I'm making are theoretical, which I enjoy a lot, you know. But on a more substantive note, the point I'm making to you is that the terms we have agreed to, those terms, so far as government is concerned, without sounding arrogant and without sounding dismissive,
good.
We are satisfied with them.
All right.
The suggestions which have been made, they will be looked at. We'll look at those suggestions and so on and so forth.
But that's what I want to know. What does looked at mean?
Yeah,
because what we want to know is, will you incorporate it into the agreement?
So far as I'm concerned,
before it goes to parliament?
Almost everything that has come to my attention, a reasonable explanation has been given. Let me give you an example. Professor Jampo, for example, makes the claim.
No,
hold on. No, of course. You mentioned
Let me quote.
You mentioned Kofi Ansa. You mentioned Chikata. Why don't you?
Okay, let's take a breather. I'll deal with Jampo. Since we want to deal with Jampo, we'll take a breather and deal with Jampo. This is the point of view. We're talking to Sector Minister on the.
You've avoided it.
Cleverly. Mining list. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're still looking at the possibilities around this Ewoya Lithium mining lease, the timetable, and what will happen. Earlier, in a few days past, civil society held a press sort of a discussion. The minister was there, MIF was there, also was the Minerals Commission. There's a lot of discussion about this. So what I wanted to say to you was that apart from the IEA and Professor Jampo and Imani and Bright Simmons, there's also a highly respected lawyer, Samuel Abu Jinapor, who says that the current agreement in its current state, he doesn't think it's good. And I've said to you the NDC as well. So there's quite a number of disparate groups who have voiced strong concerns about the deal in its present form, even though some may agree that we have to do the lithium mining. So the question is, are you going to make some changes to the agreement before you get to Parliament? Or are you going to go to Parliament to try and convince the other side to your position so that they will ratify it as is?
Well, first of all, I think Uncle Sam is a very senior, elderly statesman whom I have a lot of respect for, a member of the Council of State. We've had a lot of occasions to engage, especially when it comes to mining. I know how passionate he is about mining. I mean, but I will see him as, if you want, an environmentalist, quite a hardcore environmentalist. Yeah, a strong lawyer, of course. No two ways about that. Who
has done some good work even in extractives.
Of course, and who will normally not want us to mine at all. So you always have to situate some of these matters in context.
But he was speaking as a lawyer, though.
Yeah, I know.
When he was at the IE, he was speaking as a lawyer, not as an environmentalist.
He would rather say that we should not have any mining at all in Ghana. I mean, he said it to me several times. But anyway, I will be happy to know the basis for which he thinks this deal is not a good deal. But I don't know. So
he basically said, based on what IEA has said, he agrees with everything IEA has said. That's what he said. He said he agrees with IEA when they say we need a different vehicle. He agrees with IEA when they say we need to lock in the issue of refining.
Well, but I think
no, I'm not going to repeat those, but I'm saying that he agrees. He was speaking at their platform.
I think I've made an attempt to answer all of those.
Good.
So will we keep the agreement as it is? My answer to that, as I said, is that it's not because government is being adamant, stubborn, or arrogant, or dismissive. Not at all. It is because this was well thought through. It was very thorough negotiation, very intense negotiations, and we think that the outcome of the negotiations is in the interest of Ghana, and I think we've got some of the best terms and arrangements in respect of this lease. This is the first one that we've done. I'm hoping that I believe we will do subsequent ones, and I believe we'll get to a point where we'll have a whole cooperation, and the cooperation itself is not a solution, a conclusive solution in itself. We have to note that even when we get there, we still have to keep the checks and balances in place to make sure that the national interest is protected. Where we are, I don't see us making any change or whatever to this agreement. I think it's also important for all of us to be mindful that the global investment community is also watching and taking notes. And in any extractive industry, these matters have far-reaching consequences as to how you attract investment into all aspects of your national life. The sanctity of contract is absolutely important. And the predictability, the issues of predictability, that when people come into your country with their investments and they invest, and you have existing laws which set standards and which set parameters within which to engage. And even in this particular situation, you've been able to negotiate hard with them and gotten them to make concessions which are over and above what the law prescribes or stipulates. And, you know, in the middle of the game, you begin to try and because as it is now, there's a binding contract between the government of Ghana and Harare.
But I'm sure there's room for, and I'm not a lawyer, so you have the advantage here, but the contract has been signed, but they know that the process requires ratification. So if you said to them that there are a couple of proposed amendments that will make it easier for a national consensus to be built, I'm sure as a reasonable company, they will agree.
Yeah, but that is if we have those kinds of proposals which are compelling and compelling beyond what we've done.
And that's what I'm saying. But there's been a lot of suggestions in the public discourse. Maybe unless, of course, you cannot, as a minister, fish for comments. But if civil society were to give you an itemized list of suggested amendments, would you be in a position to propose
if civil society
to the other party?
Today, I had a very extensive discussion with civil society. We organized a workshop with civil society. We engaged eyeball to eyeball, and I said to them that it's about time we begin to talk to each other and not talk at each other.
Good.
And I think it's about time we need to sit around the table to have this. And I'm going to continue with it. I'm expecting next week to meet several other stakeholders, including the religious institutions and leadership, to have a conversation with them about this transaction. If there's anything on the table which is, you know, dramatically compelling, which you know, which is,
your choice of words is interesting. Yeah. Dramatically compelling.
Yeah, it must be groundbreaking, which is groundbreaking.
You would consider it.
Which requires that we try and look at this again. Why not? But as we speak today, there's no such thing. And this agreement...
As in, it has not come before you. Because don't forget, I've said to you that these discussions are being held in the public sphere. And if they were to present specific proposals to you, which you consider with your office, and you were to find them compelling, I just want to know if there's room. Is there room in the process flow to re-engage the company to do some amendments before it gets to Parliament?
Well,
that's what
we are not at that stage yet, so I don't want to speculate.
But the level of public discourse clearly tells you that there are proposals that are flying everywhere. I've just read to you what Kofi and Samuel Abu Jinapor said.
If there are proposals which are, fundamentally compelling, we'll take a look at them.
So are you saying that so far, from what you've heard in the public discourse,
what I have heard,
you don't see any compelling reason to make any amendment to the agreement?
Bernard, if you ask me what I've heard so far, for me, very much relates to how we implement this agreement.
Not the what of the agreement.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, let me give that to the NDC. Even the NDC's press statement, the part where they say the provisions relating to the establishment of a refinery is loose. I don't think the provision is loose. I think that it is more of how you keep your eyes open and how you monitor and how you insist to ensure that the refinery component of the whole transaction, of the whole jigsaw happens. That call by the NDC is a fair call. There's nothing wrong with that, to say that tighten the provisions relating to the establishment of a refinery. But I say to them, and I say to you that the question is not tightening it. I think it's tight enough. It is really about, when you are implementing it, ensuring that the implementation is done in a manner that there are no loopholes for slippages. So a lot of the contributions and discussions which have been made, I will respectfully say that they go to the implementation, which is why I said we're going to establish a project monitoring and delivery unit, or a project monitoring and delivering team. And some of these civil society members may be co-opted as advisors or what have you, to help with the ministry in order to ensure that the implementation goes smoothly and goes according to plan. But the agreement as it is, which is a binding agreement between the government of Ghana and the company, that agreement, so far as the government of Ghana, is fit for purpose, and we intend to take it to Parliament for ratification.
It's been a very busy period, as I said, but there's also primaries happening in a few months. I'm sure you have a couple of things to say to your constituents ahead of that.
Oh, Damango. First of all, let me say a big hello to the people of Damango, and I look forward to Christmas with them by the grace of God. Mercifully, the first time I contested for Parliament, my people were gracious enough, and by that I mean the MPP, they were gracious enough to allow me to go unopposed. The indications I've received so far suggest that I may be given that privilege again. I hope I get that privilege. And it doesn't look like there will be a contest in the nomination for the candidature of the MPP, which will be good. Then I will go into the main elections, which promises to be a very difficult one. There's no two ways about that. You have the NDC candidate who was DC for 2 terms, and who was Member of Parliament for 2 terms, and who is back as their candidate.
Funny thing, he was spokesperson for, I think, the power sector.
Yes, he was spokesperson for mines and energy.
Which is where
Honorable Adamu Tawakilo. Yes. And if he was still in Parliament, and
you'll be opposite mines, number.
I can imagine why he will be doing to me on this lithium matter. But anyway, so there you are. Yeah. And he is their candidate, and I don't underestimate him at all. And I think that it's going to be a very difficult fight. Yeah. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
We wish you well there. So we've been trying to get the minister's minds on all the discussions around. At least he left us a window that if there's a very compelling reason why some changes to be made, they are open to that. We'll see how it pans out, and also see what Parliament does as this discussion continues. But thank you for watching. We've been speaking to Sector Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, Honorable Samuel Abu Jinapor. We'll see you next time on The Point of View. Bye-bye.